And check that out, you can actually see the shadow of your ship on this building way off in the distance. That is really impressive. Starfield is coming out on the 6th of September. Before then though, let's take a look at the game's cities to find all of the cool little secrets and hidden details that are waiting for us. So let's dive in and see what we can find. Here's the first one, the Colony War Memorial, which contains a bunch of Easter eggs. If we zoom in, we can just about make out names inscribed on the bottom. But who are they? Well, this is a monument in New Atlantis that pays homage to all of the people humanity lost in the Colony War, which takes place around 20 years before the start of the game. So it's similar to, say, World War I and World War II memorials that are pretty common in towns and villages in Europe, and probably around the world as well, but I can only speak to Europe. And it shows the names of soldiers that sadly perished who are from that area. Now, this is a really nice idea that really gives the universe a sense of history. Like, it took actual determination and conflict to get here. The city didn't just spring up out of nowhere, and loads of people didn't make it. The names of these people are inscribed on the memorial as a result. Except there's just one thing, there's really not a lot of names here. You would expect more, especially for, you know, a monument that says it's a Colony War Memorial. You would expect a lot more people to have been taken out by a war. So what's the explanation? Well, maybe this memorial doesn't list the names of all the people, maybe it's more about the heroes. Just one or two really important figures. Or another explanation is this memorial lists the names of ships. These ships could contain hundreds or thousands of people. So that explains why there are only a few names on the memorial. It's certainly the most convincing answer for me, especially when you consider the sheer amount of individual people that would have perished in this universe. But as for the names themselves, I fully expect Bethesda here to include a bunch of references to actual people, so things like the names of community members and developers, and likely developers' pets. Actually, we already know that's true. This name here says Clara Struthers. Clara Struthers is a senior environment artist for Bethesda. She's worked on Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and Fallout 76. It's not clear why she'd get an inscription on a memorial in Starfield, but maybe she's just regarded around the office as an absolute legend. One thing I really want to know is whether you can extinguish the flame that's respectfully burning away here and make everyone start attacking you. So that's one little detail I like about the city of New Atlantis. Let's crack on with an even more interesting one, but before we do, I just want to point you towards my Patreon. If you're enjoying this channel, then please consider kicking $1 or $2 my way. It would be massively appreciated. Sponsor the channel on patreon.com/gaming with Griffin. Thank you so much. Anyway, back to that shadow that you saw at the start of the video. As we saw earlier, you can see that your ship casts a shadow on the building despite it being all the way off in the distance. Most games would cut corners here just to avoid having your ship cast shadows when it gets a certain distance away, sort of like how games reduce detail in far off objects to save on memory, but not in Starfield. Everything is accurately modelled and acts exactly how you'd expect, regardless of how far off it is. If there's a planet you can see, not only can you actually fly there in real life, by real life I mean in the game, but it also orbits the planet realistically as well. So the physical properties of light and shadow are always in play in Starfield. And that's just really impressive. But another thing I love about this, look at the sheer size of this shadow. It covers up most of the building. Your ship is absolutely massive. You're basically flying around in a skyscraper-sized ship. That's a lot of room to store your sandwiches. The final thing to note about this short clip is that it's not an angle you're even going to see in the game. This is a shot the devs set up purely for the trailer. And the reason I say this is because we've already seen that when you're taking off, the camera angle switches to a much closer up shot of your ship. You'll never see it from miles away like it looks here, which makes me think the devs wouldn't go to all that trouble to add in this shadow just for this shot in the trailer that most people would have missed anyway. It's not fabricated. And they didn't just make it up and put it in for this short bit. The more likely explanation is that this shadow is just in the game anyway, meaning no matter how far away something is, it will have realistic light and shadows interacting with them. Even if I'm wrong about the ship in question being your ship and it's just a random AI ship flying overhead, it's still really cool that it interacts with whatever star or light source is currently in the sky. And it casts the appropriate shadow on the buildings on the ground below. Okay, moving on from New Atlantis to another city. Neon is this freestanding city in the middle of an ocean, and it's more of a sort of underground, slightly seedy place as opposed to the shining New Atlantis capital. But one thing I've noticed is this bit, if we zoom in, we can see a sign advertising apartments. Now, this could just be scenery, and it doesn't necessarily mean we'll get an apartment in Starfield. But where is the fun in thinking like that? It's way better to speculate, and if we're going down that route, then I am 80% confident we will be able to buy our own apartments in all of the major cities, of which there are 4. The first reason I think that is because, well, this is a Bethesda game. Owning your own home is a Bethesda staple at this point, and something you've been able to do in Skyrim, Fallout 4, Oblivion, Morrowind, Fallout 3, and New Vegas. Skyrim even had an entire DLC called Halfire, where you could customize your apartments even more in depth. Another reason I think Starfield will have customizable homes is because we've actually got evidence for it. There's a perk in the game called Dream Home, and the description for this reads, "You own a luxurious customizable house on a peaceful planet. Unfortunately, it comes with a 50,000 credit mortgage with Gal Bank that has to be paid weekly." End quote. So there are homes in the game. And thinking about it, it really doesn't seem like Bethesda would put homes in the game, then lock it off to everyone unless they invest in this one perk. They will be expensive though. If the Dream Home perk gives you a home and saddles you with a 50,000 mortgage, imagine how much it costs to buy a home without this perk. And also imagine what happens if you don't pay the mortgage. Will they repossess your home and stop you from getting in, or will they send some bloodthirsty debt collectors your way to get their money? Whatever happens, I think apartments will be part of a wider system. Not just places you can go and sleep in to regain your health, but tie into quests and other things, like maybe completing a quest for a property magnate sees him give you a spare set of keys to a place overlooking the city centre, like a prime piece of real estate. Or maybe you can just take him out and steal his keys instead. It would make sense for your apartments to have different gameplay than your outposts, because otherwise apartments would just be redundant. We've already got the ability to build our own fully customizable bases, and also we're flying around in essentially our own base in the form of a ship. So what would be the point of apartments if they didn't offer anything new? So yeah, I do think they'll have quest lines associated with them, and also they're just good to give you more choice. Bethesda games are all about the choices players can take, so in Starfield it's completely down to you whether you want to spend your downtime in an apartment, an outpost, or your ship. And add to that, you can't deny the convenience of a downtown apartment right in the middle of a city. It would be near all the quests, near all the vendors, and the atmosphere and the vibes alone would be incredible. You could just stay in there and listen to the sounds of the city ambience, like one of those 12 hours of cities at night Spotify playlists you listen to when you can't sleep, which is what I'm gonna do. Onto a quick one now, but just on the topic of where exactly we can build bases, take a look back to this bit where we saw the shadow from your ship. Now forget the shadow and look at where the camera is. Imagine how cool it would be to build your outpost here, overlooking a city. I don't know about you, but I don't want to build my outpost on a lonely, desolate, uninhabited planet. You can already do that in No Man's Sky. I want to have it right next to a bustling metropolis full of light, which is something No Man's Sky doesn't have. It's not clear how close you can be to cities when building your base, like you probably won't be able to build your outpost directly inside the city limits. But if we can at least see the city from our outpost windows, that's enough for me. I'm just thinking about how it could look all lit up at night with the lights from the city twinkling in the distance, and that would really make your outpost a much more interesting place to be in. Alright, what about how big cities are? Well, one Redditor compared it to how it looks on the off-planet view view to how it looks on the on-planet view. And the conclusion is the size of cities actually look tiny. Take a look at the lake you can see just outside of New Atlantis and compare that to the lake at ground level, and it seems tiny, meaning the scale of the planets could be much, much smaller than we originally thought. But that's just one theory, and to be honest, if the planets were really this small, you would have thought that you could see the curvature of the planets. It seems more likely that these are not the same bodies of water. Another Redditor investigated the case and determined that these two lakes are indeed not the same. They wrote on Reddit that if the compass on the HUD in-game points north, then the image on the left is facing south, meaning it cannot be the lake in the photo. This puts the lake on the left north of New Atlantis. But my favorite indication of city sizes comes from Redditor Real Games Clay, who's drawn what they think the city will look like. We've seen plenty of shots of the city, but no overhead views showing its actual layout. And this isn't something they've just made up out of thin air either. They've triangulated the locations, and there's a pretty good chance this is the actual New Atlantis map. So the artist who drew it definitely has a future career as a detective, if not, an actual artist. Zooming out, this bit of the gameplay footage is really interesting because we can see the planet New Atlantis belongs to, and this suggests free flight within a star system is indeed possible. Now, we already know spaceflight is in the game, but Bethesda weren't really telling us the extent of it. Like, maybe you can fly around a bit in the Black Void, but you're not really going anywhere in the universe, you're just moving relative to the other ships around you. That is until you decide to teleport, and then the game would just move you to a different part of the universe because it's full of instances. In other words, if you want to land, you click on the planet in your star map and the game puts you into a new instance after a load screen. But since we can see the planet physically here, at the very least, it exists in 3D space, so it seems you can fly all the way around it, which means the flying area around the planet is massive. You can fly the full circumference of every planet in the game. But while you can fly closer to it because it's definitely not a static 2D backdrop, landing on it will almost certainly be locked behind a threshold. When you cross this threshold, you'll be prompted to land on the planet and instance yourself onto it. But check out something else in the footage. There appears to be a quest in a different star system marked in open space in the corner, and it even has the distance measured, which suggests you can fly straight there. Obviously it would take a while, but why would they put the distance if the only way there was to teleport to it? It suggests you can fly there. Now, this doesn't mean I'm actually going to fly my ship there every time, because I usually take the quickest options in most of these sandbox games. I'm a big fan of fast travel, but it would be amazing if players can have the ability to fly themselves to any location they want. And the implication is obviously massive, indicating that the universe really is a wide open space that you can explore free from loading screens. Another thing to notice about cities, there are no spoons. Forks, yes, but spoons are not a thing in the future apparently, which makes sense because if you were on a ship, spoons don't really work in zero gravity. Okay, another city detail, and this one is hinted at by Todd Howard. He was speaking in an interview with IGN recently and spoke about the potential for random events to happen. He says, quote, "Just a few weeks ago, I had landed on one of the early planets and this sandstorm blew through it and I went to run away from it. Once in a while ships can randomly land, enemy ships can land, so I'm going through the sandstorm, the ship landed and I get in this firefight and I got on their ship. And while I'm shooting the guys on the surface of the planet in the ship took off into space." So now I'm in outer space on the ship and I was just like, can that happen? I guess that can happen, end quote. So with random events like that, imagine what can happen in cities. Maybe a rogue weather event completely changes the atmosphere, like a passing snowstorm, or maybe it's attacked by bandits. Or maybe a huge creature appears at the city gates and forces the guards into a firefight. I'd be really surprised if cities were just these inert spaces where nothing happens, and with Howard detailing random events like these, there's almost certainly similarly random events happening in cities. Another interesting little detail to notice in Starfield, if you zoom into this shot, you can see the logo for NASA. Now Bethesda has described the aesthetic in Starfield as NASA punk, and it seems like that's got the attention of the actual NASA, who've given Bethesda the license to use their actual logo. I mean, it's kind of a compliment, isn't it? I would give Bethesda the license to use my logo if I was NASA. But look closer and we can see it doesn't actually spell out NASA, which stands for National Aeronautics and Space Administration. It says NASX. This is a merger of global space agencies that happened when humanity left Earth and needed a global effort to facilitate this exodus. Now, we don't exactly know where this shot is from. It might be a city or it might be somewhere else entirely, but we know where it's not, and that's Mars, because the Mars sky isn't blue like it is in this pic. It might be Earth since the ground looks dried up and desert-like, and we know that in Starfield the Earth is a bit like this as well. It's unable to sustain life, which is why everyone left. It's not the first time we've seen the NASX logo though, because in an earlier piece of footage we can just about make it out here, which is in some sort of space flight museum. So we'll see the space agency a lot in the game. I think it's got a big part and probably part of a quest line, and these are just our first glimpses of it. Anyway, that's my Starfield City deep dive. Everything I've noticed about cities in the game. I cannot wait to play this, but what about you guys? Are you looking forward to exploring these cities? Let me know in the comments. I'll be making so many guides about this game when it comes out on September the 6th, but in the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and for more Starfield videos, subscribe to the channel.